Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to take a look at the basics of making a food prep game. So we're not going to look at customer queue and not going to really look at time management. We're just going to look at the basics of having a variety of ingredients. You click on the appropriate ingredients to create a plate, and then we check to see if the plate matches the order that is being requested. So that's really a large part of the game. So let's just get right into it. Now, the 3D assets I'm going to use, you do not need. I just want to say that because I don't want anyone to be put off and say, "Oh, I don't have these assets. I can't do this." I just purchased some assets so we have something to look at. This code would work with primitives, okay? So I just want you to know that there's nothing about what I'm going to show you is predicated upon using these assets. You can use your own assets, okay? But in case anyone's interested, I am using the frying pan from Old Pans. I am using the bulk of the ingredients from Burger Constructor. And again, despite the name, there's no functionality there. They're just 3D models. And from food and drinks, I am using the plate. Okay, so those assets are in here. Now, hopefully I don't make a mistake because there are two versions of some of these assets. I made a duplicate because they function differently. We're going to have the assets laid out onto the screen. Those are different than the assets that are being instantiated. They may look the same, but functionally there's some difference. So my apologies if I mess them up. I'll do my best not to. Okay, so let's go ahead and drag these assets into the scene. Now, if you notice, they're lining up nice and right where I want them. That's because I already came into the prefabs and assigned them positions. I don't think you need me to show you how to do that. That's just clicking on the asset and then entering the X, Y, and Z position in the transform component. Not looking to waste anyone's time, so I already arranged these ahead of time. Okay, now the way this is going to work is we're going to use the on mouse down event, and for on mouse down event to work, these need to have colliders. So these objects all have colliders on them, okay? Now, since the hamburger has to be cooked, I'll do that one separately, but everything else, the bun, the bacon, the cheese, and the top of the bun, these have the same script on them, and the script, when you click on them, causes the duplicate that I mentioned, which is slightly different, to be instantiated, spawned on the plate. So before we get into that, though, I need to show you the creation of the variables that are going to be used to check your plate versus the order. So let's go ahead and just create an empty game object and call it GM. You technically don't have to do this, but old habit. And we will look at the first of our 5 scripts, and it's called Game Flow. You can call it whatever you want, but because I usually use Game Flow to manage the overall events, then that's what I usually call it. So basically, something that isn't specific to any one object, that kind of transcends multiple objects, I'll tend to put in here, like scoring and maybe UI control. But in this case, it's much simpler. It's just 2 variables. So public static int order value. Clearly, this is saying what the requested order should be. Public static int plate value. Clearly, this is the plate that you're assembling, and ultimately, you're going to want this value to match this value. So how did I go about this? And just, this is a way to do this. I'm not saying this is the best way to do this. I'm saying this is a way to do this. Each position in this number, and it is treated like a number, it's an integer. Okay. Each position represents a certain ingredient. So if you look at the screen, going left to right, the 10,000th position is the bun. The 1,000 position is the hamburger. The 100 position is the bacon. The tens position is the cheese. And the ones position is the bun. So what happens is when you click on one of these, then the corresponding number is increased by the amount of times that you click on it. Now, most of these would be either ones or zeros because you're probably only going to have one bottom bun. Although I've seen some restaurants put like a bottom bun in the middle if it's like a triple decker or something, but that's more complex. So you're only going to have one bottom bun, or you're going to have zero of an ingredient, like you might have zero cheese. But certain things you might have multiples of. So, like the hamburger patty, you might have two or three of those. So, as this is currently set up, and you can use whatever value you want, I just had to choose a value to test this. This is top bun, no cheese, one bacon, two patties, and a bottom bun. So that means this number has to be turned into that. So how do we do that? That means there's going to have to be a third variable, which is not in this script, and that is the food variable. And that is, as I said, each one of these has a value. Clicking on this will add 1. Clicking on this will add a 10 to the number. Clicking on this will add 100 to the number. Clicking on this will add a 10,000 to the number. Okay, so that is the GM script. Now that I've mentioned that, now we can come back to the ingredients. So for on mouse down to work, there needs to be a collider. In this case, I'm using a mesh collider. And here is the script that's attached to it called click place. So this is the second of our 5 scripts. Here, public transform clone object. You can see that here. And what this is you're creating a reference to the instantiated version. As I said, this, which was in the mine folder, is slightly different than this, which I'll get to in a minute. So basically, when you create the transform variable, you can just drag and drop the prefab right onto it. And so you're creating that connectivity between the the on-screen object and the instantiated version, which is going to appear in the plate or in the frying pan. So public transform clone object, and it has to be public. That way it makes it accessible in the inspector. Public int food value. So here's the third value that I talked about, that you've got the plate value and you have the order value. Well, you need a food value that gets added to the plate value. And then when you're done, you can then compare the plate and the order value. So the food value, again, because it's public, makes it accessible in the inspector. So what happens is that if I click on him, you can see food value, just like I said, the 10,000th place. Here it's a hundredths place, here it is the tens place, and here it is the first place. This uses a different script, so this is done slightly differently because this has to be cooked first. Okay, so that's the instantiated object. That is the value that will be added to the plate value, and the rest of this is just on mouse down. So again, for on mouse down to work, there needs to be a collider, and there is. And then this script is attached to multiple different objects, so we have to check to see the name of the object because each one is going to be handled somewhat differently. Like the bun bottom object, since it should always be on the bottom, it's going to be put right on top of the plate. I don't recall if I mentioned it earlier, but some restaurants, maybe they have like a triple decker, so you might actually have a bun in the middle. You would have to then adjust the coding accordingly. But like I said, this is just meant to be introductory. You can't go from A right to Z. You have to go to B to C to D to E. So this is meant to be it's meant to be an iterative design. Okay, so if you're clicking on the object and the object is bun bottom, it gets instantiated there. If you're clicking on the object and the object name is bun top, it gets instantiated here. So what happens is the instantiated version is slightly different. It has a rigid body and gravity is enabled. Why? Because I didn't want to deal with all the difficulty of trying to determine exactly where the positions go. So what happens is it spawns it above the plate and then gravity just drops it down. That's the main reason. Well, that's one of the two reasons why there are two different versions of the object, and that is that version, the instantiated version, has a rigid body. So if it's the bun top, it gets instantiated above the plate and drops down. If it's cheese, same thing happens. I just had to create a little bit of a Z offset because it didn't look like it was lined up right. Bacon is slightly different because having one strip of bacon looked weird, so I put 2 strips of bacon. It only adds a 1 to the food value because it just visually looked wrong to have only 1 strip of bacon. But if you wanted to, you could have the bacon be treated like anything else. So I have 2 instantiated. You could have just 1 instantiated, and if the person wants 2 slices of bacon, then you have to click on it twice and the value gets added twice. I just didn't want there to be any confusion about that. That even though there's 2, it's only going to add a 1 to the plate value. And then we're just adding the food value to the plate value. Again, the food value is unique to the individual object, and it gets added to the plate value, and then this just displays the plate value and the order value. That way we know that it's working. Okay, so since we looked at the ingredients other than the bun, other than the hamburger patty, let's look at that. So what makes it different is rather than spawning here, it has to spawn here, cook, and then you move it over. So let's take a look at how that works. So again, it has a collider. That way you can do on mouse down. And this is fairly simple. So what this does is that public transform clone object, because once again, when you're clicking on the ingredient at the bottom, it needs to know what object is going to be instantiated. In this case, on mouse down, we're checking to see if the name of the object the script is attached to is cutlet, and then we instantiate it in a different position, specifically inside of the plate. Inside of the pan, my apologies, big difference, inside of the pan. So in other words, this script functions very similar to the script that we just looked at. It's specific to the cutlet. So I could have put this into the other script, but I was having certain issues, so it has its own script. Now, what we're also going to do is that when we click on these, as I said, a version is instantiated. So we can just take a quick look at one of those. So this is the bottom bun, and this is the bottom bun here that gets instantiated. And like I said, this version is slightly different. It is going to have no script attached to it because we don't want you to be able to click on the bun once it's on the plate. And that's about it. Nothing really interesting here. If we click on the bacon, as you can see, okay, we come to the bacon version. So as you can see, this has a rigid body because again, I said that's going to spawn over to the plate and then we're going to let gravity drop it onto the plate because I didn't want to deal with trying to come up with this complex decision of what layer something should be on. So the rigid body allows for gravity, and gravity is enabled. And because Unity is weird when it comes to rigid bodies and mesh colliders, just to avoid it, I replaced it with a box collider, which also makes the object flatter and things balance better. And we'll just do a couple more. So we got the cheese. So when you click on cheese, it brings up this one. And again, that object has a rigid body with gravity enabled, box collider. It is not a trigger. We want these to be solid so they sit on top of each other. And then again, the last one is the other bun. And that bun also has the rigid body. So again, no script attached to these because you're not clicking on them once they get to the plate. You will click on the plate to say that you want to serve it, but you don't have to click on the object. So that's one of the reasons why I have two different versions. Okay, and the last thing is that two things, sorry. So we said that when you click on the meat, it gets instantiated into the pan. When you then click on the meat in the pan, it then has to move it to the plate. So that means we have a separate script there. So if we click on cutlet, so there it is. So as you can see, the script that it has on it is cook move. So we'll open that. So again, the flow is that you click on this, and a hamburger gets instantiated here. That hamburger has a different script. It has the cook move script. So again, it needs to have a food value, but in this case, it's private and it's set to 0. We're going to have a mesh renderer because what we're going to do is as it cooks, it's going to change color. And still cooking is going to be used as a control so that it doesn't change color if you move it too soon. In start, we are simply creating a variable to grab that mesh renderer. So again, like I said, we're going to change the color. So as you can see, we created the meat mat mesh renderer variable, and then we set it to the mesh renderer of this object. So the object is attached to. And then we start the cook timer. So we jump down to the cook timer. Wait 10 seconds. You can wait whatever amount of time you want as far as how quickly the food cooks. Maybe in your game, there's going to be stoves that cook faster. So maybe this would actually be a variable. So maybe it starts at 20 seconds, but you get something better and it cooks it in 10 seconds, whatever. Food value, as I said, the hamburger is in the 1000 position. And so this will not be equal to 1000 until it's been cooked. That's why it changes here. So the other ones have the value already because they don't need any prep. This one does not get its value until it is cooked. Because if you serve someone something raw, you did not give them what they wanted. So whereas these don't require prep, a bun is a bun, cheese is cheese, bacon is bacon, but there's a big difference between a raw patty and a cooked patty. And then this is to make sure that it, as soon as you click on the ingredient in the bottom and it moves to the frying pan, you could immediately click on it in the frying pan and move it to the plate. In other words, even though you put it in the frying pan, it didn't have a chance to cook and it's still raw. So what this does is this makes sure that you haven't moved it, and that way it doesn't take on a cooked color when it's on the plate that it would have had you change before you moved it. And then once again, we're using on mouse down. So on mouse down, we're simply saying get component, transform position, and we're moving the object, in this case, the patty, from the plate, from the pan to the plate, from the pan to the plate. And then we add the food value. So here we're setting the variable. We haven't actually applied it to the plate value until you do on mouse down. And then again, we just check the still cooking so it doesn't change color once you've already moved it to the plate. It can only change color while it's still in the pan. And what this does here, so if I was to, I don't think I quite explained it. I said it in passing. So as soon as you move the patty to the pan, you could click on it again. So since the default value is 0, if I move it to the plate from the pan, it would be a 0, again, because it's raw, it hasn't cooked yet. Whereas if you wait the 10 seconds and then you click, now this is 1000 and not 0. And with that, I think the last thing to explain is the plate itself, because we have the GM script, which creates the variables. We have the cook move, which moves it from the pan to here. We have click place, which is on the non-meat. We have the meat con, which simply instantiates it from here to there. And then all that's left is serve plate. So serve plate is attached to, or will be, I haven't attached it yet, to the plate itself. So we'll put serve plate onto the plate. And again, it has a collider, and we're using on mouse down. This simply says if the order value is equal to the plate value, then just debug log, enter the word correct. In other words, in your game, this is how you check to see if it's right, and then you would make a decision like if it's correct, maybe you get a tip. If it's not correct, the client is angry, and depending on how complex of a system you have, maybe less customers will show up. That's up to you. Like I said, this is just the broad strokes. This is just the basics of the food prep to match an order that is requested. All that other stuff we can talk about in other videos. And that's it. So as you can see, even though there's 5 scripts, a lot of these scripts only do like one thing. And it's your choice if you want to try to consolidate these scripts. It's a balancing act. Sometimes I like more scripts that are simpler. Sometimes I like less scripts that have more checks. It's really an arbitrary decision. For the most part, it probably won't impact performance, at least on a game like this. Okay, so let's actually run this now. And I really kind of did this different than what I normally do. I tried to show you the individual steps, but I kept stumbling when I did it that way. So right now it wants, I believe we said, the bottom bun, 2 hamburger patties. Technically, you could put both into the frying pan at the same time despite the small size. But again, that's more advanced. See, it's cooked. We'll move it. We'll cook the next one. And you could add like a particle system here, so it looks like it has steam. and then we said it wants 1 slice of baking. It displays 2. That's just visual. It only actually increases food value by 1. And then the top bun, and then if I click on the plate, it does indeed say correct. Now, just to prove that it works, even that if I choose the wrong stuff, it won't work. Let's not do a hamburger. We'll just do this. And I click on the plate, and it doesn't say correct. So it is indeed accurately checking what is being made. So I think that's about it for this video. Like I said, it's not meant to be a full cooking sim. It's just meant to have the basics of clicking on ingredients. Some need prep, such as being cooked, and that when you are ready to serve, there's a final check to see if what you've made matches the order. And I think that this is a fairly easy tracking system using the integer, and that each ingredient represents a certain position in that number. Okay, so if you like this and you want to see more, please do a like for the video. Please leave a comment saying what you'd like to see, and I'll see how much I can build on top of this. And I think that should about do it for this video, and please do enjoy the rest of your day.